keep the sun out.
No, I guess I wasn't filming that whole thing. I thought it was, unless it automatically shuts off. It doesn't?
No, it'll film till the 16 megabytes are used up.
Really? I wonder how long that takes. Is that your phone beeping or mine? How long do you think it takes to? How much film? You mean like
No
you film
film. There's no film.
the megabytes? I mean, they're like film.
No, then you don't have to develop it.
Right. It's
And
right here.
a film has a negative, and it creates a image that you can see. And this is strictly digital. You understand what I'm saying? The difference. This is strictly digital. There is no negative. There is no image until it's digital time. Hey girl, you my girl? Come here. Yes, you are. Yes, you are. Oh, you're so soft. You're a lot softer than those puppies. You know that?
Go ahead, tell me a story. Because if I'm not listening, my camera is, and I can go back and watch it later. How about that? Tell me a
Well,
story. I want to hear. I'll tell you what story I want to hear.
When I was out the boat the other day, we went on the sandbar. 3 different women, girls, those young girls with the little bikinis on. 3 different ones of them propositioned.
But they didn't look any better than I did because I checked them out.
No, they didn't. But they were young, and I mean, you know, like they propositioned.
I'm young.
Now, that's the story. You want me to tell you the truth?
I'm like, I'm young.
I told you a story.
I do know that my body looks better than theirs.
Your
Maybe.
body looks great.
I know it.
You got a kid body, a 30-year-old body.
I'm still 16. 15. No, tell me a real story now. Don't look at you're not paying attention. You're losing the moment because I'm filming you right now and you're on your phone.
Well, I know that.
Okay, well tell me. Tell me something like not a story. You could. I'm gonna clip this and edit it. Tell me something like you'd like to always talk about.
Well, when I grew up in Albany, Georgia, I remember that that's back in the days of hard segregation.
Really?
Yeah, and I was bused to school. All of us that lived out at Radium Springs
To the black school?
were bused to Albany, Georgia, which was 4 miles away, and then all the way across on the other side of Albany, Georgia, which took as long as it did to travel the 4 miles, around the black schools, the black high school and junior high. So, you know, in other words, white people didn't mind busing until it was black folks started to be bused.
Can't believe you're saying this. I really cannot.
Why?
I don't know. Just can't. Are you saying this? We're gonna film it.
And I'm telling you a story. I didn't choose to be bused. I was 12, 13 years old.
What year was that?
Whenever I was in the 7th or 8th grade or 9th grades. By the time the 10th grade came around, I had a car. But anyway, I used to ride in that bus and look down at these little black girls, 6, 7, 8 years old. And they have their hair in those little braids and all. And we'd ride by, and one of them one time pulled her skirt up. And I just considered them pickaninnies. That's what everybody called them, pickaninnies. And then along comes later, I'm at the,
How much later?
I guess I'm around 13, probably 13. So, well, it wasn't much later, because I was probably in the 9th grade. That's 15. So I must have been younger. I must have been in junior high, which was 7th and 8th. So anyway, around 14 or so, I don't remember the exact year, I was getting my hair cut in the, now this is a Forrest Gump story. And in a lot of ways I am Forrest Gump. But I was getting my hair cut in the Gordon Hotel.
A lot of ways.
Which was right across the street from the city court and jail. And I was getting my hair cut. Right next door was the Albany Hotel. I mean, next door. And both of these in downtown Albany.
Is it really downtown? How big is Albany?
There was 60,000 back then. About like Decatur is now, back then. So I noticed now the window, that big old window on the side, that there was this crowd of farmers in overalls that were milling around the the front the yard out front of the New Albany Hotel, the grass out front. And they all had pickaxe handles in their hands. And I could hear words of hatred and I didn't know what was going on. The reason they had pickaxe handles is when when Albany started the civil rights movement, there were some local protesters that went to City Hall and protested, and he came out and beat them over the head, beat them as much as he could with a pickaxe. And so then he got a big container and just put all the pickaxes in the world in there, and you could come by and get one. Well, that morning, that most of these redneck farmers had them in their hands, and they were milling around words of hate, had those things in their hands, and we went out front and couldn't leave because the police had the whole place barricaded off. And at the police station there was 3 or 4 school buses there, and as we sat there and watched those rednecks, we could hear the refrains of a song that I had never heard. And I could hear it. We shall overcome someday. Couldn't see them. The Albany Hotel and all, the Gordon, where I was, Gordon Hotel and Police Department on this street, and here was really the main street. They were coming this way. We shall overcome someday. And I said, what the hell are you going to overcome? And they came around that corner. As they got closer and closer, and you could hear that song. It was anger. We're going to kill us some niggers.
Who said that? While they were
farmers.
singing?
All
Oh,
those
okay.
farmers.
With the pickaxes.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, it got loud, and they started coming around the corner. They knew Martin Luther King was in town. Martin Luther King was leading this march, who I didn't know who he was.
Ooh.
But all of a sudden, they came around the corner, and there was Martin Luther King in the middle of the street, flanked on both sides by 8, 9, 10, 11-year-old school children dressed in white, the girls in white dresses, and the guys in white shirts and black pants like he was dressed. He was the only adult. And those men next door, those redneck men that had pickaxe handles, every one of them dropped those pickaxe handles to the ground, hung their heads, and walked off. And it just changed my life. I mean, that day, that moment changed my thinking 100%.
That was early.
I couldn't believe it. Then they loaded all the school kids up, and they took Martin Luther King, put him in jail there, in the Albany jail. And that's where he wrote the letter from the Albany jail. What's famous is the letter from the Birmingham jail that he wrote. Well, this is where he first wrote a letter. He refused. He had a $50 bond. He refused to make it. He said, I'm staying here till y'all let me go. And they eventually did. But
how long did that
they
take?
loaded about a week. They loaded all these school children up. I don't remember the time frame, but it wasn't long. They loaded all these cute little, nice-looking, cleanly groomed, girls in their Easter dresses and guys in their white shirts and pants. I mean, King probably bought them.
The pickaninnies?
No, they weren't even picking any there. That was gone. That was.
I know, but I'm saying, was it the same people?
Yeah.
That you had referred to as a pickaninny earlier in your.
Black folks, black women, girls. I mean, yeah. And I never heard. I mean, I dropped that term when I was 36, 37 years old. I had a date with the director of the Child Snatch Division of the Department of Human Resources. Back then, it was called Department of Pensions and Security. And we were on the way to Huntsville. And I was talking to her about how I didn't like the child snatch people, as the department. She didn't like me calling it child snatch. She called it protective services. What they went about doing is snatching children out of homes because people were poor and couldn't provide like they thought they should. And all of a sudden she started talking about pickaninnies. And, That was it on that. That's first date. Now,
The reason why I asked you that is because when you're
I
first,
told her it was disgraceful.
when you started the story, you were talking about riding the bus and being bussed and how you didn't mind, white people didn't mind being bussed.
Didn't know any different. I mean, that's what we were supposed to do.
And then that you'd see these children on the side of the road
And
with
Martin
their
Luther King.
with
Right.
their rows, no, with their cornrows, and all you knew
Oh.
them as was pickaninnies. And then so you saw this
Well, you know,
story.
I guess this was like the beginnings of the civil rights movement, and they would rag us when we would ride. They knew what we were doing. We were being busted, and they would rag us when we came by. You know, give us a hard time. And I grew up in the South, in Albany, Georgia, at the start of the civil rights.
What I'm saying is, it's interesting that you saw that march and that changed your life just a few years later,
Yeah,
a couple years
within
later.
the same year, probably.
See?
But then, years later, I'm getting my hair cut in the Stafford Hotel in Tuscaloosa, Alabama.
This is after you had the date with the girl that called him, that you got a
No,
disgusted.
way before.
Oh, before.
This is when I was like 15 years old.
Oh, okay.
14 or 15 probably. Now again, I was getting my hair cut, this time in the Stafford Hotel in Tuscaloosa. And Dad was building either Martha Parham Dormitory for Women or the one across the street. I can't remember the name right now, it just slips me. But they're twin dormitories for women. And those dormitories were 100 yards at the most from the gym, what they used to register students back then. That George Wallace stood in the schoolhouse door. Okay, and while Dad knew something about what was going on, so he diverted and took me down to the hotel to get a haircut. And George Wallace came in. While I'm sitting there, George Wallace came in. George Wallace had lost his first election, statewide election. He was probate judge, and to Big Jim Folsom, and he had said he'd never be outniggered again.
Oh my God.
And he turned from a liberal in law school to a racist to get elected. Anyway, he came in from right after the stand in the schoolhouse door. I was in the third barber chair, third or fourth, I think the third one. And he came in the door and he shook hands with the man in the chair getting his hair cut and with the barber. And then on the second one, he shook hands with the man in the chair and the barber.
Who were all white?
Of course. And there was what you call back then a shine boy, about a 70, 80-year-old black man shining that second customer's shoes. And he stood up, he was stiffer than me. He stood up and he stuck his hand out and he said, "Governor." And Wallace sneered at him, walked past him and stuck his hand out for me.
Mm. That's ugly.
And I didn't shake his hand. I refused to shake his hand. My father said, "That's the governor of the state of Alabama, Clint. You need to apologize." And I said, "No, I'm not apologizing." He treated that man like dirt. So, Forrest Gump again, you know. But those were like, no, the one in Albany was the most significant. The one in Tuscaloosa just pissed me off, you know. So, that's my story. I'm sticking
That's
to
one
it.
of your stories.
I'm sticking to it.
But we'll do another story later. Those are the Forrest Gump stories.